Mikulás, Télapó, Santa Claus. Are they all the same? Those of you with Hungarian heritage may know that in Hungary the 6th of December is celebrated as Mikulás nap, St. Nicholas Day. On this day, children traditionally receive one of their 2 lots of Christmas presents, the other being on the night before Christmas, 24th of December, when the gifts are tagged as from baby Jesus. But who or what is Mikulás? Mikulás is the Slavic version of Miklós, that is, Nicholas, and it refers to Saint Nicholas. Okay, who was Saint Nicholas? Saint Nicholas was a Christian bishop in Asia Minor, more or less today's Turkey, back in the 3rd to 4th centuries. Traditionally, he lived from 270 to 343 Common Era. Traditionally means they make their best guess. He was said to help the poor who were kind-hearted, so not all poor. Under the cover of night, he brought gold to the homes of kind-hearted but poor families and children. There is a specific story which is relevant to the legend of the gift-giving and Saint Nick. There was a poor man who had 3 daughters, whom he could not marry off due to a lack of suitable dowries. This meant they would be sold into prostitution. Great. Saint Nick went to his house 3 nights running. On the 1st and 2nd nights he put gold through the open window. But on the 3rd night the window was closed, so he threw it down the chimney, where it got caught in a sock. From this, many countries in Europe on St. Nicholas Day, the 6th of December, the purported day of the bishop's death, gifts are distributed to children, in boots or shoes on the windowsill, or in stockings by the chimney, by a figure dressed in a cloak, mitre, and carrying a crook. Not a Santa suit. But the gifts are only for good children. Bad children receive a stick in their sock, or maybe coal, instead of something nice to eat. In Central and Eastern Europe, while St. Nicholas gives out gifts to the good children, the bad ones face the wrath of Krampus, often equated with the devil. If you attract the ire of Krampus, those sticks are not put in your boot, but across your backside, at best. In some cases, the children were thrown into his sack. Fortunately, when we attend the Austrian Christmas party here in Christchurch, Krampus limits himself to trying to frighten people. Health and safety is our friend sometimes. But focusing back on Hungary. Hungary adopted the folk traditions associated with St. Nicholas Day from German influences. As early as the 10th century, that is, right at the beginning of the Hungarian state, St. Nicholas was known and various role-playing games were developed. In Hungary, an old man went from house to house and examined, praised, and showered the children with gifts, or scolded and punished them. We have written evidence he was named Mikulás as far back as 1856. And in 1859, Jokai Mór used the imagery of Mikulás leaving gifts in a child's stocking in his writing. And by the late 1870s, the folk custom such as gift-giving was commonly called Mikulás nap, St. Nicholas Day. So not exactly an ancient tradition. The year is recorded because of a ban that appeared. Why? Because the tradition frightened children. Hungary did not universally adopt Krampus, but its Mikulás was fearsome, a soot, black-faced, chain-rattling monster called Láncos Miklós, chained Nicholas, who both rewarded and punished children rather than the cheerful, rosy-cheeked Santa Claus we know today. And despite the ban, the chain-rattling figure was still appearing as late as the 1970s. That's 100 years. So when did the fat, cheerful Santa in a red suit appear? You'll often hear this was the result of the Coca-Cola ads from 1931. In addition, the marketers eliminated Santa Claus's judicial role and removed the Krampus figure that symbolized punishment. Not good for business. But a Hungarian children's book back in 1928 depicted Santa Claus as a fat, jolly, red-suited figure. This predates the famous 1931 Coca-Cola ad by 3 years. And by the way, by 1934, chocolate Santa Clauses began to be produced in Hungary. The other change that came about is where Mikulás lived. In the early times, he lived in heaven, as he was a saint, and oversaw the children, assisted by angels, maybe elves, and Krampus or devil figures. But these days he lives in Lapland, has a sleigh pulled by reindeer, and is generally without helpers. This reflects the adoption of the Finnish joulupuki, who has nothing to do with St. Nicholas. He comes from an older, pre-Christian European tradition. And there is another figure in Hungary associated with this time of year. Télapó, Father Winter. This one could be older than St. Nicholas and possibly is linked to the older European tradition. Now, it is maybe pre-conquest, but if so, it never made it into the ancient Hungarian folklore course I attended. It was more about shamanism, predicting the future, setting up marriages, etc. at this time of year. And I couldn't find any evidence of this online either. Let me know if you have a creditable source that says otherwise in the comments below. Otherwise, let's just say it's post-conquest. Throughout Europe, the gift-giving creature of the winter holidays have had a very long tradition, especially in Northern Europe, where winter is winter, and people gave each other gifts at the solstice. Odin, like the Saxon god Woden, where the word Wednesday comes from, is sometimes portrayed as racing across the night sky in a cart laden with gifts. This may seem odd, as Odin is usually associated as the god of the dead and warfare, and the leader of the wild hunt. But if at the solstice children leave carrots or hay in their boots for his horse, Sleipnir, who incidentally has 8 legs, Odin will give them gifts in return. Now, back to Télapó, Father Winter. There is a Russian equivalent, Ded Mороз, or Father Frost, who brings gifts on New Year's Day. Because of this, you'll sometimes read that Télapó only appeared in the 1950s as a Hungarian equivalent to Father Frost, as the Soviets were not keen on the Christian imagery. For example, St. Stephen's Day was banned during Soviet occupation. I did a video on St. Stephen's Day, linked below. And or the name Mikulás, because it was Slavic, was unacceptable. But the documented facts do not bear this out. In 1850, that's 100 years before the Russian occupation, János Arany wrote a poem about Télapó, Old Man Winter, called Téli verse, Winter Poem. And other writers also wrote about Télapó. And like János, they used it as 2 words. By 1895, it had become a single word. So Télapó is not more recent than Mikulás, and in fact may be much older. Answering the question of the video, Mikulás, based on a Christian saint, and Télapó, the personification of winter, are 2 separate entities. Both have been merged into the modern Santa Claus, that is familiar worldwide, sometimes referred to as Globális Mikulás, but only after being sanitized and made more commercially valuable, Game Boys instead of nuts and fruit. I hope you have a great Christmas or winter solstice, whichever you prefer, or if you're in the southern hemisphere, a summer solstice. And if you haven't already, please like and subscribe.